look out. Hold on, folks. Watch yourselves, gang. Brace yourselves. Pull your pantaloons up real high, because it's time for more Far Cry for you to enjoy. Huh? It's Far Cry. It's more Far Cry for you. Okay, get this, gang, right? If you loved Far Cry, and you wanted more Far Cry, even more Far Cry than you've already got, okay? Then Far Cry New Dawn is more Far Cry for you to keep playing Far Cry because you love Far Cry. It's Far Cry! What more do you want? You know what it is by now. I've talked about this before, but Ubisoft have really got it down pat now. They've got a system. They've got a factory line of games that come out, and they're all of a guaranteed acceptable quality, or at least as close to a guarantee as this game industry allows. You can be more or less certain that you will get a relatively satisfying, if uninspiring, gameplay loop in a big open world full of the same things to do over and over again, in a way that feels like you're playing a digital stress ball. There's not a lot in it anymore to really, like, leave your jaw dropped on the floor. The storylines are decent, they've got interesting little characters and stuff, but again, it's nothing that'll really stick out in your mind forever. But they're all relatively well made. The quality is always, at the very least, acceptable and often quite good. They look nice, the gameplay is the same all the time, but it's consistently good at its core. And there is something to be said for that. I mean, I've made fun and I've criticised the Ubisofting process. It leads to pretty much all of Ubisoft's games carrying the same rather obvious DNA. But it's certainly a formula that's working for them, even if it is so obviously a formula. And I guess more power to them for doing that. But this is Far Cry New Dawn anyway. It's called new in the title, but it's not all that new. It's spun off from Far Cry 5, and it's set in what is supposed to be a nuclear apocalypse or something, I guess. It's closer to a Mad Max style apocalypse, where a lot still seems quite intact. And there's not things like zombies and all of that stuff in general. It's more, you know, humanity's inhumanity to humanity. You know what? I ain't even gonna record the drivel that just spilled out of my mouth. But you know what I mean, sort of. You know, it's more evil bandits in a, you know, society gone all wrong. So therefore, everything is still nice and green. It's a very pretty game. Actually puts me in mind a little bit of the movie Annihilation, the Natalie Portman film. Just a lot of flora covering everything. These pink flowers are everywhere, contrasting against the bright greens and the clear blue skies. It's certainly not a bleak dystopian future. It's a very beautiful dystopian future, I suppose. But it really is only aesthetically that you get a sense of any sort of apocalypse, any sort of world ending. Because, like I say, it is basically just more Far Cry. The society of Far Cry, in that everyone has lots of bases everywhere, hasn't altered at all. Everyone's still making lots of camps that you get to go and take over. So it doesn't feel different as a Far Cry game, and it feels like far less of a dramatic departure than something like Blood Dragon did, or Far Cry Primal did, where again, those were still basically following the same gameplay loops, but aesthetically they were a lot more dramatic, and thematically they felt very separate. You know, Far Cry Primal really stuck to that idea of no guns, all funds, just more up close, more, well, you know, it was set in sort of prehistoric-y times, wasn't it? And they kind of really stuck to that, and it informed the way the game felt as a result. Far Cry Blood Dragon, trying to speak properly today. Similarly, it had a very boldly unique aesthetic, and a sense of knowing stupidity, I shall say, that made it feel distinct. Whereas this really just does feel like another Far Cry game. With only very aesthetic lip service paid to the idea of an apocalypse. You do get a saw launcher, which is the weapon we got. This is the version 2 of it, if I recall correctly. Where you fire buzzsaws at people, which is very fun. Obviously, because the game isn't super out-and-out gory times, you're not, sending body parts flying everywhere, which I don't need in my video games, but I do sort of need if I'm firing buzzsaws at people. So that reduces the satisfaction just because it is buzzsaws and you expect them to saw things. It's a little bit reckless to use as well. This one fires like 3 saws at once and they bounce all over the place and ricochet and often hit. They hit way more often than not, but they also hit anything, including your ally character and NPCs who aren't hostile, but will become hostile if one of them gets carved up by a buzz. Well, we just see here, we've knocked over Nana with the buzzsaw trying to hit the bear, and that happens fairly often if your allied characters or NPCs run ahead of you, or you're just not, worried about friendly fire because you don't expect it to crop up much in a game like this, then yeah, you're picking up your friends a lot because you fucking buzzsawed them. You got some nice. I like the roster of allied characters in this. Actually, you get a pig and you get a dog, of course. You also get Nana here, who she's the sniper character, therefore more or less trivializes the game. Just point out an enemy and she'll do the rest, which is fine. Between that and the buzzsaw, you are pretty kitted out in this game. So yeah. That's about it. It's Far Cry, isn't it? I realise I say that with certain games, but I say that with this especially because, and I was thinking about this, Far Cry reminds me of episodic games, except they're not episodic games, in terms of how I approach them critically. I used to try and review every episode of an episodic game series, and then gave up because by the time I'm into episode 4, I'm just saying this. It's the same game. They've changed story beats, of course, but I can't talk about too much of the story because you don't want to spoil things. So I'm left talking about what? The way it looks, the way it plays, the way it feels, which is exactly the same, more or less, in episode 1 as it is in episode 4. So I just stopped and started just, I don't do traditional reviews anymore, but nowadays I'll either do it at episode 1 or the final episode and not bother with everything in between. And I feel like doing that with certain Ubisoft games, except there's no end points, there's no final chapter to speak of. This could be it. I saw someone talk about how this is sort of a fitting end for the series, but we'll see more Far Cry for definite, so, there ain't no end in sight for anything to do with Ubisoft. What else can you do in this game? You can build up a little camp. There's a sort of a base of operations with various things to upgrade to get new stuff. You upgrade the gun area to upgrade your weapons to higher levels. Upgrade the effectiveness of medkits. Upgrade a helicopter area so you can go on expeditions to earn stuff. And you use ethanol to build up a lot of this camp. And all sorts of other crafting resources to make guns and vehicles and stuff like that. All of which is fine. It can be a little time consuming. But of course that's by design because there are microtransactions in the game. On the less offensive scale, side of the scale, are the ones in here. It is just, get more resources and shit. Like get these Ubisoft coins and that. Still not acceptable in a premium game. I never find microtransactions acceptable in any of them. But it is what it is. Just be warned, at the very least. So that is it. It's a very nice looking game. It's got all of the charms of a Far Cry game. If you enjoy that stressful repetition of Far Cry, which when I'm in the mood for it, I'm perfectly fine with that. I've been bored a few times this week, and Far Cry New Dawn's been suitably adequate to take up some time, which is really how these games should be approached. They're adequate time wasters, and Far Cry New Dawn is yet another one. Another adequate time waster.